So we're going to start with a little reflection. So even as I pause in this moment, why does anyone want to take a break, step away from what they're doing, go for a little walk? It's always for that feeling, that inner feeling of experiencing some stillness, simplicity. To experience that feeling of being stable inside. And although one may find various ways to get into that experience, it's the feeling that every being in this world wants to capture. And not really be conveyed in an image, but the best image that can convey it is like a point of light. That point of light, or that experience of being unaffected, that feeling of lightness, that feeling of calm. It's more than just visualizing a point of light. It's about the feeling one is experiencing. And it is a very unique, distinct feeling that everyone is looking for. When that feeling of anxiety, heaviness, and sorrow is felt, it's very clear one knows that's not the feeling one is looking for. Feeling of being connected, being grounded, is very different from feeling as if one is being pulled in different directions. A phrase in the West, spreading one's self thin. Attention in all sorts of directions. But to feel very centered. This is why such an experience is, yes, invisible, but it is invaluable. It is very distinct what Every being is looking for that experience. And that is what fills me. I may not know the depths of who I am, my identity, but I am certainly looking for a feeling that is definitely not heavy, not fluctuating, not unstable, not complicated. Oh, today we have an interesting story for those of you who know Dr. Seuss. So I am not like our lovely Tanya, who is this amazing performer and has all sorts of different accents and voices and tones, but you will have to bear with me with this. And so it is a rhyming story, if anyone knows anything about Dr. Seuss. So I will try to show you pictures while we're actually reading, so that may be a little bit of a juggle for me. But so the topic for today is about spirituality, which is invisible, but it is very invaluable, and yet it is very distinct. And this is what the significance, there's, I'm sure, very, very many different layers of meanings of this book, but that was really what was the pull for today. So the book is called Horton Hears a Who. So, on the 15th of May in the jungle of Newell, in the heat of the day, in the cool of the pool, he was splashing, enjoying the jungle's great joys, when Horton the elephant heard a small noise. So Horton stopped splashing. He looked toward the sound. That's funny, thought Horton. There's no one around. Then he heard it again, just a very faint yelp, as if some tiny person were calling for help. I'll help you, said Horton, but who are you? Where? He looked and he looked. He could see nothing there, but a small speck of dust blowing past through the air. Right there. I say, murmured Horton, I've never heard tell of a small speck of dust that is able to yell. So you know what I think? Why, I think that there must be someone on top of that small speck of dust. Some sort of a creature of very small size, too small to be seen by an elephant's eyes. Some poor little person who's shaking with fear that he'll blow in the pool. He has no way to steer. I'll just have to save him, because after all, a person's a person, no matter how small. So here, sitting on that speck of dust. So gently and using the greatest of care, the elephant stretched his great trunk through the air, and he lifted the dust speck and carried it over and placed it down safe on a very soft clover. Teeny, teeny, teeny. Humped voice. 'Twas a sour kangaroo, and the young kangaroo in her pouch said humph too. Why, that speck is as small as the head of a pin. A person on that? Why, they never has been. Believe me, said Horton, I tell you sincerely, my ears are quite keen, and I heard him quite clearly. I know there's a person down there, and what's more, quite likely there's two, even three, even four, quite likely. A family for all that we know, a family with children just starting to grow. So please, said Horton, as a favor to me, Try not to disturb them. Just please let them be. I think you're a fool, laughed the sour kangaroo. And the young kangaroo in her pouch said, Me too. You're the biggest blamed fool in the jungle of Nool. And the kangaroos plunged in the cool of the pool. What terrible splashing, the elephant frowned. I can't let my very small persons get drowned. I've got to protect them. I'm bigger than they. So he plucked up the clover and hustled away. Through the high jungle treetops, the news quickly spread. He talks to a dust speck. He's out of his head. Just look at him walk with that speck on that flower. And Horton walked worrying almost an hour. Should I put this speck down? Horton thought with alarm. If I do, those small persons may come to great harm. I can't put it down, and I won't, after all. A person's a person, no matter how small. Then Horton stopped walking. The speck voice was talking. The voice was so faint he could just barely hear it. Speak up, please, said Horton. He put his ear near it. My friend, came the voice, you're a very fine friend. You've helped all of us folks on this dust speck no end. You've saved all our houses, our ceilings and floors. You've saved all our churches and grocery stores. You mean, Horton gasped, you have buildings there too? Oh yes, piped the voice, we most certainly do. I know, called the voice, I'm too small to be seen, but I'm the mayor of a town that is friendly and clean. Our buildings to you would seem terribly small, but to us, who aren't big, they are wonderfully tall. My town is called Whoville, for I am a Who, and we Whos are all thankful and grateful to you. And Horton called back to the mayor of the town, You're safe now, don't worry, I won't let you down. But just as he spoke to the mayor of the speck, 3 big jungle monkeys climbed up Horton's neck. The Wickersham brothers came shouting, What rot! This elephant's talking to Whos who are not. There aren't any Whos, and they don't have mayor, and we're going to stop all of this nonsense, so there. They snatched Horton's clover, they carried it off to a black-bottomed eagle named Vladikov. A mighty strong eagle, a very swift wing, and they say, Will you kindly get rid of this thing? And before the poor elephant could even speak, that eagle flew off with the flower in his beak. All that late afternoon and far into the night, that black-bottomed bird flapped his wings in fast flight, while Horton chased after with groans over stones that tattered his toenails and battered his bones, and begged, Please don't harm all my little folks who, have as much right to live as us bigger folks do. But far, far beyond him, that eagle kept flapping, and over his shoulder called back, Quit your yapping. I'll fly the night through. I'm a bird, I don't mind it, and I'll hide this tomorrow where you'll never find it. And at 6:56 the next morning, he did it. It sure was a terrible place that he hid it. He let that small clover drop somewhere inside of a great patch of clovers 100 miles wide. Find that, sneered the bird, but I think you will fail. And he left with the flip of his black-bottomed tail. I'll find it, cried Horton. I'll find it or bust. I shall find my friends on my small speck of dust. And clover by clover with care, he picked up and searched them and said, and called, Are you there? But clover by clover he found that the one that he sought for was just not around. And by noon poor old Horton, more dead than alive, had picked, searched, and piled up 9,005. Then on through the afternoon, hour after hour, till he found them at last on the 3 millionth flower. My friends, cried the elephant, tell me, do tell, are you safe? Are you sound? Are you whole? Are you well? From down on the speck came the voice of the mare. We've really had trouble, much more than we share. Then that black-bottomed birdie let go and we dropped. We landed so hard that our clocks have all stopped. Our teapots are broken, our rocking chairs smashed, and our bicycle tires all blew up when we crashed. So Horton, please, pleaded that voice of the mare's, will you stick by us who's while we're making repairs? Of course, Horton answered, of course I will stick. I'll stick by you small folks through thin and through thick. Humph, humphed the voice. For almost 2 days you've run wild and insisted on chatting with persons who've never existed. Such carryings on in our peaceable jungle. We've had quite enough of your bellowing bungle. I'm here to state, snapped the big kangaroo, that your silly nonsensical game is all through. And the young kangaroo in her pouch said, me too. With the help of the Wickersham brothers and dozens of Wickersham uncles and Wickersham cousins and Wickersham in-laws, whose help I've engaged, you're going to be roped and you're going to be caged. And as for your dust speck, ha, that we shall boil in a hot steaming kettle of bezelnut oil. Boil it, gasped Horton. Oh, that you can't do. It's all full of persons. They'll prove it to you. Mr. Mayor, Horton called, Mr. Mayor, you've got to prove now that you really are there. So call a big meeting, get everyone out. Make every who holler, make every who shout, make every who scream. If you don't, every who is going to end up in a bezelnut stew. And down on the dust speck, the scared little mare quick called a big meeting in Whoville Town Square. And his people cried loudly, they cried out in fear, we are here, we are here, we are here, we are here. The elephant smiled. That was clear as a bell. You kangaroos surely heard that very well. All I heard, snapped the big kangaroo, was the breeze, and the faint sound of wind through the far distant trees. I heard no small voices, and you didn't either. And the young kangaroo in her pouch said, me neither. Grab him, they shouted, and cage the big dope. Lasso his stomach with 10 miles of rope. Tie the knots tight so he'll never shake loose. Then dunk that dumb speck in the bezelnut juice. Horton fought back with great vigor and vim, but the Wickersham gang was too much for him. They beat him, they mauled him, they started to haul him into his cage, but he managed to call to the mayor, don't give up, I believe in you all. A person's a person, no matter how small, and you very small persons will not have to die if you make yourselves heard, so come on now and try. The mayor grabbed a tom-tom, he started to smack it, and all over Whoville they whooped up a racket. They rattled tin kettles, they beat on brass pans, on garbage pail tops and old cranberry cans. They blew on bazookas and blasted great toots, on clarinets, oompas, and boompas and flutes. Great gusts of loud racket rang high through the air. They rattled and shook the whole sky, and the mayor called out through the howling mad hullabaloo, hey, Horton, how's this? Is our sound coming through? And Horton called back, I can hear you just fine, but the kangaroo's ears aren't as strong quite as mine. They don't hear a thing. Are you sure all your boys are doing their best? Are they all making noise? Are you sure every who down in Whoville is working? Quick, look through your town. Is there anyone shirking? Through the town rushed the mayor from the east to the west, but everyone seemed to be doing his best. Everyone seemed to be yapping or yipping. Everyone seemed to be beeping or bipping. But it wasn't enough, all this ruckus and roar. He had to find someone to help him make more. He raced through each building. He searched floor to floor. And just as he felt he was getting nowhere and almost about to give up in despair, he suddenly burst through a door, and that mare discovered one sugar quite hidden away in the Fairfax Apartments, apartment 12J. A very small sugar named Jojo was standing, just standing and bouncing a yo-yo, not making a sound, not a yip, not a chirp. And the mayor rushed inside and he grabbed the young twerp. And he climbed with the lad up the Eiffelberg Tower. This, cried the mayor, is your town's darkest hour, the time for all whose have blood that is red to come to the aid of their country, he said. We've got to make noises in greater amounts. So open your mouth, lad, for every voice counts. Thus he spoke as he climbed. When they got to the top, the lad cleared his throat and he shouted out, "Yop." With that yop, that one small extra yop put it over. Finally, at last, from that speck on that clover, their voices were heard. They rang out clear and clean. And the elephant smiled. Do you see what I mean? They prove they are persons, no matter how small. And their whole world was saved by the smallest of all. How true, yes, how true, said the big kangaroo. And from now on, you know what I'm planning to do? From now on, I'm going to protect them with you. And the young kangaroo in her pouch said, me too. From the sun in the summer, from rain when it's fallish, I'm going to protect them, no matter how smallish. The end. So I remember when we were given that book as a little gift, and perhaps maybe we'll hand it to you if you can think about the significance in terms of what that might mean for yourself in terms of spirituality. So that's sort of maybe just a little bit of a introduction there for you. You can think about that for a moment. If you have any thoughts to share before I share anything.
For me, I think, is it Horton, the elephant?
Yeah.
I think he is the representation of a pure, kind, sweet soul who has this love for humanity. And the phrase says, like, a person is a person, no matter how small. You know, each person has its own different qualities, personalities, physical appearance, status in the community. Most often we are so, the word, impressed with people who have great talents, and achievements. But, when someone comes to you who is an ordinary person, and sometimes we just, based our, kindness, if we get something in return. So seeing each one of us as a soul, we are all the same. And in this journey of self-transformation, we have our different challenges in life, and we make different efforts. Some may go fast in their spiritual study, some may go slow, but it doesn't matter. What really matters is our experience, our pure heart, and that self-respect that we have to nurture to ourselves, because if we have that self-respect, we see that in others as well.
Well, thank you, Pauline. It's a very, very full sharing that you had. And also Emma had shared here as well, which is connected to what Pauline had shared, protecting myself no matter how small I am, a soul. And that was definitely the feeling when I first heard this story. And so we even called the title of this Soul Cafe about the invisible is invaluable and distinct. And it's a profound story in a sense, as as Paulina shared. I mean, like, it's really easy to sort of see things on the outside. And we used to be, beings who used to be able to see things differently. And we can see that in other animals, actually, and young children. They can actually sense vibration. Animals are very good at that. We used to as well. And we used to be able to actually have a different kind of compass. And, for some of you, you've taken the Raja Yoga workshop, the inner compass, but this capacity to actually see in a different way. It's not you physically see something, but you actually sense things. And that was really the feeling from this story, that which is quite interesting, that the main character is an elephant. It's like, a character that seems so big compared to these little individuals. But still, listening to the story, you could feel that it was not even about, just physically how small these individuals are and physically how big he is. It was a capacity that he had to be able to sense. And I know, again, Pauline and Hema have both shared about the soul. And that is, for those of you who haven't taken the Raja Yoga course, it is this capacity that we have. And what I really found also really significant about this story is because something that is invisible doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? And that, and that includes basically anything that we value, which is invisible. It might seem like, and you ask everyone, if they had a chance to pause, really, and have some time to reflect, they will realize, or they already know, that what really matters to them is the experience in the day, the quality of their day, what they're actually feeling, as opposed to the things. Even if it seems like it's about things, it's the experience one has with those things. And this is actually, in this journey of Raja Yoga, it's really actually getting back to practically feeling that is my reality. We know that, but we have so many things that pull us away from that. And the way that we seem to behave on a day-to-day level, especially at times of distress, at times when it feels like you have no time, when you feel like there's that pressure, it in a way kind of reveals not our true nature, but actually our acquired state. And that's a huge piece of Raj Yoga. It is really, really helpful to understand. It is an acquired state. And so listening to the story is very powerful because, something that is not visible, you can see the level of resistance that Horn had. I was thinking so much about that. I mean, we've seen extreme cases, but to protect, for me, what it felt like, the invisible, to protect, the value of, the experience of being a soul, the truth of being a soul, there is a lot of opposition. And it's really interesting that, the story went to quite extreme, but we've seen out there when it comes to our ideas of what is invaluable and what is not valuable. And certainly we've seen that in history as well, in terms of how we even treat each other as human beings. And so the other thing that I found quite interesting about the story is, in the title of the Soul Cafe, we also included this aspect of this distinct. We are actually, this feeling that we are all searching for is a very unique feeling. Yeah, we may have very different ways of trying to seek for it. And we know that, we know, at least in general, majority of things that we do to seek for it has negative impact ramifications. but it can get quite subtle, I suppose you can say, in terms of the means in which we seek for peace and happiness. But still, those feelings, you don't need to teach that to somebody. You don't need to go to school for that. You will be able to sense that. However, when it gets to something quite subtle, to be able to recognize there's nothing wrong with nature, there's nothing wrong with being in the mountains. But the question is, are those experiences sustainable? That's really more of the question. And, to pose that question on yourself or to pose that question with someone actually is very much related to timing too, because you will notice there are some individuals who have felt that they've done all of that. They pursued all of that, and yet it was not fulfilling. It was not enough. And you always hear about this phrase that's in the West of hitting rock bottom and going soul searching. And it's quite interesting. It's looking for something deeper and not being able to find it. And so the other aspect in terms of this story that's quite significant is about being a soul is that we're very distinct. Right? And that was actually what the pull was in terms of this story, which inspired us to share it today, is that this aspect that, if you noticed in the story, these living beings on this tiny speck of dust, they could not even see, right? And yet, there is when it comes to me being a living being, I am very distinct. Like, I think, I have focus, I have purpose. I move in a certain direction depending on what my awareness, my focus is. And to say this whole thing is me, and we know, and you hear countless stories out there that can't be. I've heard many stories as well, in terms of if all of a sudden, you've lost a limb, or you've had to have your hair get cut off, and anticipation that you're going to lose your hair when you go for chemotherapy for your body. If there was cancer, you are at those times really challenged. How do you define yourself? How do you define your sense of identity? And so this sense of self, even the way we use those words when it comes to my body, my arm, we say all these things are mine, implies it actually isn't me, but something I possess. And yet at the same time, for those, I know I'm talking to those who are on Zoom who have already heard this, but my soul, right? Again, something that the way that our language reveals our current state of how we perceive things, that if it's also my soul, then in the experience of life, then who am I? What is me? If I keep calling all these things I possess, there needs to be, who's thinking? And it's, again, not about word choices. It's about what is revealed in terms of how I experience what is my sense of identity, because that's very much going to connect to what is my sense of value. And so I know that Hamlet shares something else here as well, which is connected. I need to be spiritually self-sufficient, not depending on anything or anyone. And this is the impact of what has had. This is a great point in terms of what has happened when we stopped experiencing ourselves as these distinct conscious beings, and we started to define ourselves as physicality. Because when you define yourself as physicality, then basically you'll find anything that's in common with you. And if you think that you're this, you're going to seek around you for anything that has to do with what you identify is in common with you. Now that's kind of, we really think about what are the implications of that, because anything of this image here may not necessarily be seen as valuable by others. I could lose anything as well. It's not even just this package. It's also in relationship to anything that's related to this body. And a lot of that has to do with relationships. It also has to do with status, position, and it's not necessarily physically at a workplace. It could be even within a household, within a family unit, who I am relative to someone else. All of this is all based on value. And as Hema was sharing, this aspect is if I identify myself on the outside, then my sense of value, my sense of stability, my sense of things being stable and reliable is really dependent on a lot of things that I have no control over. And to really experience that I'm actually just consciousness, but my default is that I am consciousness of soul, that we are actually beings of consciousness. And there's really only two worlds in which we live in. Either I'm my default, my natural nature, which is I am a soul. And by nature as a soul, I am consciousness. But if I don't remember who I am, then I become conscious that I'm a body. But even though it's not who I am, I'm still by nature still a soul, but I believe I am the body. And then nothing that I do is for me, the soul. Everything is still for this body because my entire reality, how I feel, how I think, how I believe, is still all for the body. So it's a tricky thing. As souls, our nature truly is that we are just consciousness, and how we use our capacity as consciousness. But we do operate through the body, and through time, you will start to get used to being in a body. So we lose that awareness of ourself, and then we can completely switch over. So this distinctness of being the soul is lost. And now it becomes very distinct in terms of being this body, but we relate to everything else around us as if it's going to actually fill me. And this is then back to this, this concept of timing. When that comes to one's story, personal journey, where they feel like, doesn't really matter, what's happening around me, what I have, it doesn't seem like it's fulfilling me enough. That isn't something that's going to be able to be forced upon me. That's only something I could really only detect within myself. And so very significant in terms of that which is invisible. Sometimes individuals call it, a good quality of life. Still, I'm working where I am at this government clinic, as souls just grapple with how do you measure that? And that's the problem, is that there is still a lot of ego, and I don't mean it in a insulting way, but there's still a lot of just feeling that we need to quantify things. And it runs short if you can't quantify something that really is going to be fulfilling to the soul. So I'm just going to pause here. If anyone else has any questions or any comments, you're welcome to type in the chat box or unmute yourself.
I would just like to share about what's going on, for most part, where, especially in the workplace, when you don't have that awareness of, of yourself as a point of, consciousness, a point of light, a lot of times you become emotionally dependent and you want things to be certain. If you have that mentality, there's always peacelessness, there's always chaos. But when you maintain that awareness of being a dot, of being a point, consciousness, you are able to remain calm and stable, and you are actually becoming more emotional independent, because you know yourself, and you don't need to find or seek happiness in the external. And you become more powerful also when you connect to the Supreme Soul, God. So having that awareness of who you really are and linking your connection with the Supreme Soul, it makes you more powerful and more stable. And that's a very wonderful experience of being a spirit, being a soul in this, in this world. So we become emotionally independent when we know who we really are, regardless what's going on outside.
Thank you. That is really the accurate definition of what it means to be detached. It's detached and loving to be able to actually be free in your sense of who you are. So you're not attached to all these other supports that never used to actually be your supports, but you're able to be in your true sense of being. And I'm really glad that, Pauline, you brought up this aspect of Supreme Soul, which actually was what was inspiring me to find a story, was actually that this aspect that God is not omnipresent. And it seems like a very comforting thing that he's all over the place. But by nature, we are souls. We're very unique. We're very distinct. We have a very unique need, which is spiritual, which is vibration, the quality of the experience of love and peace. It's spiritual food that we need, spiritual vibration. And so when we call the Supreme Soul God, that he's all over the place, he's in the ocean and he's in the mountains and he's in people. And we watch as the oceans and the mountains and the people, they all change, they all fluctuate, they start to decline. There's you have no guarantee even of what's happening in nature. And on a very subtle, even if it might not be conscious, an unconscious level, it actually pulls us further and further away from ourselves, our original self. Because even as souls, we actually have a personality. Right. For in this study, you also learn that about rebirth as an eternal being. And that because of the experience from previous births of the ideas that we've had, not knowing ourselves, it has led to a certain impact. And that impact has resulted in forgetting my true nature as a soul. We think of personality and we think it actually has to do with body language. And to be honest with you, we may not admit to this, but we do in subtle ways, stereotype, ourselves and each other. Someone looks like this, they must be like that. Someone looks like that, they must be like this. And we do that. I watch myself, and that's the whole point in this journey, is you watch yourself and see these ideas that have formed and over more than one birth. Something as simple as somebody driving a truck in front of you, a huge truck in front of you. Do you have assumptions of who's driving that truck, and also the kind of personality they have driving that truck, right? There is one sister who actually comes to the center. And it's just fascinating just watching as this witness, this detached observer with understanding what's going on inside in terms of your attitudes that formed. And so she came, to a regular student to this, just for us to drop, just to drop something, just pass along a gift to her. She was driving a big black truck. In my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, these ideas that we have. You're so tiny and you're driving this big truck. So it's fascinating again. Some may say that, it's our nature. We label things, we put things in boxes, but this is the impact of being body conscious, is we have asserted value, quality of being as something physical. And when we are actually naturally in that experience, returning to our nature of being conscious of being a soul, there is no attachment to that this is this and that is that. And that's the issue with attachment, is attachment and love are two separately, completely different things. Where there is love, it would be natural love. That means it doesn't matter who it is. It's just love that you emanate. But because when we forget ourselves as souls, we become empty, then of course, when you're empty, you're going to be looking all over the place for something to sustain yourself. And because of that, how can you actually just have love unconditionally? And a part of this journey in Raj Yoga as well is then there's such a level of forgiveness for yourself too. And to be honest with you, you can't even start to forgive yourself because you can't even afford it. That your relationship with the Supreme Soul becomes a very meaningful, personal relationship that he basically has to give you love because you can't even love yourself. Forgive you, but not really need to forgive you because there's nothing to forgive. It's understandable, our journey. But until we come to a place where we can actually forgive ourselves. So a huge piece also in this study is actually having knowledge. The Supreme Soul has knowledge that's very unique, that's in this study. And the Supreme Soul needs to give this knowledge. How is he going to give this knowledge? He actually cannot give it by inspiration. He needs a medium to give it. And so in the study, in the beginning of the days in which it all began, there was one soul who had all this life experience from multiple births. And we can't go all into that because we only have a very small amount of time. But he needs to use a medium to speak through, to give this knowledge that no other human being has, no human being has. He's not even a human being. He's always in that experience of being a soul. There needs to be someone who stays awake because all of us will forget ourselves at one point in time. And so it's very interesting because he is then also very invisible, but he's also very unique, that there's only one being who has that information. Not a human being, but one being who is always a soul who has that information. So that connection with Supreme Soul is very, very important because it's about getting myself back, my very distinct personality, my very distinct integrity, which we have actually tried to look for it all around us. But because everything by nature is physical and by nature I'm not, we can't really get any of that around us. It will just only drain until it comes a point where you're searching again. So, any final thoughts before we have a little reflection? Yes, go ahead, Paul.
I'll make it simple. I just reflected on something that I learned, in this session is thinking about the box, outside the box. So the box represents, the body, the worldly, the worldly intoxication, which give us a lot of sorrow and pain. So once we think outside the box, we go beyond of who we really are. It means the subtlety, our deeper sense, which is soul, and we are spirits. And along with that, the knowledge, yoga, and connection with the Supreme Soul. Then we are out of the box and we feel free and we feel liberated. And it's a journey and it never happens overnight, but it takes a lot of effort, determination, commitment, faith. So think about outside the box. So
I mean, yeah, it's interesting because we have tried to think outside the box until the Supreme Soul actually gives information for us to think outside the box. And I thought about this a long time ago, and I don't mean it as any sort of insult, but I notice how fashion never really changes. It just recycles the same things over and over again. I'm like, this isn't really unique. This isn't new. And it's what happens when you're inside the box and that's all you know. However, we all used to be outside that box because otherwise we wouldn't still be searching and looking. And we need to be, I guess, our own personal timing when we're actually ready to actually feel like there's something inside this box. We don't use those words where it's like, there has to be more, basically. And so definitely, this, because we're very unique, that it's, we talk about the intellect, but even when let's say I'm talking right now to Pauline and to Hema, I'm very clear I'm talking to two beings, right? I'm not talking to a wall. I'm not talking to the ocean. But even if you're talking about a wall and ocean, it has a certain form. You can identify what it is, but it's not like it's just this vast, ether. And, when we have thought God to be omnipresent all over the place, it's like he has lost his personality in terms of our experience of him. And that affects us because we are souls. And the Supreme Soul, he stays in the true nature of what we used to be like. So when we basically lost the understanding of what he's really like, it has broken our link to what we are like. And that's a really, really important piece to understand in this study as well, because my relationship with Supreme Soul actually deeply affects my relationship with myself and deeply affects my relationship with matter, deeply affects my relationship while action. And that was a huge realization for me this morning as well. So it's a big topic, but for those who are inspired and wish to take the Raja Yoga course or redo the Raja Yoga course, we're welcome. We tend to have it at least once a month, if in English as well as in Hindi. And so I know we're running out of time, so we will have a little reflection, unless Hema, you had anything to share if you're still with us.
Not really, but I was just wondering, when we are thinking, our thought has vibration, right? And one thought attracts the another thoughts, and there are chain of thoughts, right? So
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand how that one is navigating, right? Because there are a series of thoughts, like in 5 minutes, I don't know how many thoughts and then they just go unmonitored, right? We don't monitor them, but when we start monitoring them, it's really interesting, right? Like how one thought attracts the another one based on the vibration of that particular thought, and how that works, right? So no, it was interesting. Like if you can just throw a little bit light on that one, that would be nice if you can.
Yeah, a few things. Definitely there's a vibration behind a thought. But, for us, because when we've lost our sense of self, to basically try to say, okay, now vibrate peace, vibrate, happiness, we don't even really know what that means. We'll try, and we'll try to find things that remind us of that. Right. And this is a part of thinking outside of the box, or stuck inside the box, is we will now think about very physical things as a source for those feelings. And those feelings create that vibration. Now, the tricky thing is that those feelings, though, were born from something temporary, right? And I can say from personal experience many, many times, when I sit in nature, that feeling of peace, I have felt the experience of being a soul, that peace is very different from the feeling of nature's peace. I can feel that difference. And it took some time, but I wasn't even trying, but I could feel it, that there's a difference. And the reason why that's connected to what you're sharing is because it's related to the importance of knowledge, is that to be able to actually have the right vibration. There's two things of what you're sharing about. And the first thing is about this aspect of vibration, to even be able to have the right vibration at this time, because we have forgotten ourselves, requires knowledge. And knowledge basically, and it's not just knowledge, but who is teaching and speaking the knowledge is very, very important too. Because we've got used to it just being about words. If that was the case, there's this aspect of soul has been around for centuries. We should have figured ourselves out by now, but we haven't. And this aspect of peace, that word's been here for centuries again, but look at what the way the world is that who actually who is the embodiment of that constantly, who hasn't lost their sense of self. And that becomes important because it helps us to be able to do the second part, which is having a reference point. Is that because the Supreme Soul is always in that true original eternal nature of what we were like, always that nature of being a soul, that nature of integrity that we used to have, he becomes a reference point. And you will notice that we always need reference points. And how you will know that is that when you're driving on the road, you depend on that line on the road to make sure you're on the right side of the road. When you're even this heater that we use here, when it's dark inside this room, we turn on the heater, I depend on seeing that light. You notice that most machines will have like a light.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't have a light, you can feel the button. Even if you're typing on the computer, you rely on the keyboard where there's the F and the J, there's a little line you'll feel there so that you know that your hands, your fingers are actually on what we call it here in Canada, home row, so that you know that when you're typing, that you're actually in the right position. Same thing with piano. You know, the way it works is that there is a central C key and everything basically is based on that. So everything that we do always has a reference point. So if we don't have a being who is a reference point, then you don't even know if, is this the right kind of piece or is this the wrong kind of piece?
Yeah, exactly. Because that was the thinking I was just reflecting on that. I feel I'm a peaceful soul, and having connection with the spirit, that vibration attracts another thought based on the spirituality or like based on the experience with the Supreme Soul. But if I think that, peaceful ocean or peaceful lake or peaceful mountain, so my thoughts are more related to the matter, so it actually doesn't attract the high vibrational frequency thought, but it's usually mainly matter related thought. And then slowly, even if I start my thinking with the peace, but after 5 minutes or after half an hour, I am completely lost, like even if I'm in a meditation, because one thought, and like, what is your reference point for the thought, as you said, that really determines how my journey is going to be like, right?
Most definitely. And that's why, when it comes to vibration, it can be quite abstract for many. So that's why in the study, we really focus on eternal thoughts, eternal truths that we do need to think. But what are we going to think about that actually triggers an awareness that is an ancient awareness, this memory of who we are. And then we access the feelings and then the vibrations. And basically our very makeup is that we are our soul. Yeah. And yes, we can have, peaceful experiences and think about the mountains and the oceans. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's not arguing with someone if that's what really speaks to them. But it's really about now for those who feel that they are not getting enough, basically, from those things, it then becomes a matter of understanding. Because my nature is that I'm a soul. Vibrations of matter is only going to fill me to an extent, but it's not going to heal me. It's not going to restore my vibration as a soul. It's kind of like, why would you give a car broccoli if that's not what's going to, that car needs gasoline, right? So I need to, that's why knowing who I am and what is going to really fill me is going to be very useful information. And what is going to drain me is also very useful information. So the knowledge piece is very, very important because we're consciousness. We actually move through life based on understanding. And so if
Yeah.
my understanding about myself is off, vibration is not enough, right? Because you can be around somebody who has very good vibration, but you'll just want to be around them all the time.
Yeah, it's very temporary, and it's like you are depending on someone, right? It's not self-sufficient, as I said.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Supreme Soul, if he could just be here and he just vibrates all the time, but how we actually lost ourselves is our understanding of ourselves has lost. And because our understanding of ourselves is lost, we have lost our power. And so our vibration has completely shifted. Our vibration is very heavy now. It's very stressful. It's very anxious. So that's why really our awareness is really what
Yeah.
matters the most.
Yeah.
It will shift everything.
Yeah. As we discussed earlier, that awareness is my power.
Yes.
Awareness is my support, and my awareness is my companion. So if I remember these three things, then I would understand like how important it is for me to have a right type of awareness, right? Because my all actions are based on my awareness, right? So
definitely, and this is back to what Pauline was sharing, is that I really am just consciousness. You know, I was reflecting this. I'm not really, there isn't that there's body conscious and then there's soul conscious and then there's consciousness. It's just my true nature is I am a soul, and what my mechanics is that I am consciousness. But what's going to happen as a being of consciousness in the physical is that when you're not exposed to knowledge, and you don't need it when you're yourself, through time, you're going to become familiar with physicality. You're going to become familiar with the body you're in. After a while, you're going to lose that. You as consciousness will start to change. You become familiar with your surroundings. And if your surroundings are that is this body and others and their bodies, then it's bound to happen. And that helps again to be able to understand this journey of forgetting ourselves is inevitable, but it's not the end all be all. You know, we come back to ourselves again. So those are, deep aspects of the study of Raj Yoga, but it's all a part of healing as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I know that's very good questions, very good things that souls have shared. But if anyone ever has questions, welcome to email a center as well. So we'll have a little reflection. So even when I'm not aware of who I am, I do know that consciousness rules everything. This aspect of awareness that is required of thinking to make decisions based on whatever I understand to be valuable, to be meaningful, to be worthwhile. I don't need to be aware I'm a soul, but I am aware consciousness drives everything. But now I'm actually learning to realize that is the end all be all of me. I am consciousness itself, sitting in this body. But as consciousness, my sense of self has felt so physical for so long. Because as consciousness, I relate only to the physical now. And yet I seek for those feelings of peace, of love, of freedom, of lightness, compassion. I seek for all of those things through the physical. And yet those were experiences I, the soul, used to have by nature. with no conditions. I used to feel them all the time. So just being aware, I am the being right now, and understand any feeling of emptiness that I feel. It's because me, the soul, I need to feel much more than what physicality can give me. But without rejecting things, running away, I learn to consider I am a soul. What is going to feed me? What is my true nature like? What does it feel like to be me? I'm a soul and I am just a guest in this physical world. If I'm a guest, then where do I really belong? And who do I belong to? What is truly going to help me become whole and full again? Questions that I invite myself to reflect on. Shifting.